Welcome to the John C. Guthrie Show, episode 1. We're going to be talking about Biden's proposed gun control. You can't really say legislation. Some legislation, but mostly executive orders, directives, etc. Specifically, we're going to be talking about pistol braces. Real quick, this is the second episode. I recorded episode 0 a few weeks back. Feel free to check that out if you want a little bit more info on me and where I sort of see the show going. I didn't publish that at all, or publicize rather. I recorded it, I posted it. Whole long process to get a new podcast going. It's got to trickle through all the podcast like hosting services, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. That takes a few weeks. So I let all that sort of trickle through. And then I got sidetracked with some stuff. So this is episode 1. It's a fine place to start. But yeah, if you want a little more info, go check out episode 0. Real quick, a little bit about me, especially as it relates to this issue. I am a former college English and critical thinking professor. I've worked in the outdoors. I've done all sorts of stuff in the business world. 36 years old. When it comes to guns, I have been around guns my whole life. You know, grew up with guns. Guns are normal part of everyday life for me. My first gun, I think my dad got me when I was 10, if I recall correctly. I think I shot the first time when I was 7. I've carried a gun daily, just concealed carry for, I think 15 years, 10 or 15 years. You know, have guns for home defense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was a wilderness guide in Alaska for a few seasons, carried a gun for bear protection. So, you know, a lot of experience with guns, using guns, carrying guns, thinking about guns. I've always been interested in guns and the gun control issues. What else? I did the NRA pistol training courses. So it's, you know, what you need to do in North Carolina in order to instruct the concealed carry classes. So you take a special NRA class, and then you go to the North Carolina Department of Justice Institute, and you take a class through them. Did all that stuff, and I just never ended up using it, but I've been through those instructor courses also. All right, if you want to see more about me, johncguthrie.com is the website. That's JOHN, the letter C, GUTHRIE.com. You can sign up for a newsletter there. You can send me some monies if you can find it in your heart. Come on. Patreon.com/JohnCGuthrie also. And feel free to send me an email, johncguthrieShow@gmail.com. If there's anything in here that you like, dislike, disagree with, send me an email. I'll respond to your emails for sure. I'd love to hear some feedback. You can catch me on Twitter at jcarlguth. That's letter J, CARLGUTH. All right, that's that stuff. So before we dive into the pistol brace issue, first just want to give you a little bit of a background. So April the 7th, Biden made a speech laying this stuff out, and you can find the transcript of the speech on the whitehouse.gov site, and you can find the fact sheet that corresponds to these issues on that site as well. I'm not going to, make fun of all the stupid shit he said. I'm not going to focus on the emotional appeals. I'm trying to get right to the content. So he laid out 6 things. I'm just going to touch on those real quick before we dive deep into pistol braces. So the first one he lays out is he wants to rein in ghost guns. He provided very little detail there. Doesn't make much sense what he did say. This is something that I'll dive into in a later episode. Number 2, he wants the ATF to generate a new report on gun trafficking. Great. Sounds good. I don't have any problem with reports. Let's do it. Let's study it. Ironically enough, Google Fast and Furious, Operation Fast and Furious. If you want to see an interesting report about the ATF and gun trafficking, I'll talk about that in a second. Pistol braces. That's where we're going to focus on this episode. I'm going to explain to you what this issue means and why it matters. It does matter, and we're gonna go deep into that. Number 4, he wants some red flag laws. I'll probably do an episode on this also, but briefly, he says things like red flag laws will reduce suicides and domestic violence. Red flag laws are basically any ability for local law enforcement, or I guess it could be federal also, to confiscate one's guns before one has committed a crime. So usually what it would be is a family member or a spouse says, hey, I'm worried about this guy for these reasons. And then before those reasons can be adjudicated, somebody comes and temporarily seizes one's firearms until the matter can go through court. Long story short, the suicide thing, most, if not all states have a means to involuntarily commit somebody for a psych eval. So I have a hard time believing that red flag laws are going to be a good idea for that. Domestic violence, if somebody is communicating threats, that's a crime. You can arrest them. If somebody's not communicating threats, but is still a legit enough concern that, it rises to the level of the state needing to violate their legal and human rights to self-defense without any due process, I would say instead of having a red flag law, let's put the burden on the state. Provide protection to the potential target. Like if this is a domestic situation, right? A girlfriend and a boyfriend, maybe let's say they don't live together. She thinks that he's a danger to her, something like that. Instead of adjudicating this issue extrajudiciously, why not provide security to the target? If it's a case where there's a tip that this guy is he's gonna plan some attack or something, follow him, put a fucking cop on him 24/7. Basically it's just a hard sell to me that the right way forward in one of these scenarios is based on what someone says without any court proceeding. You can confiscate somebody's weapons. But anyway, we'll save that for another day. 5th, some extremely vague language on preventing urban homicides. I love that idea. It'll be interesting to see what the proposal is, but I think that's a fantastic idea. In my opinion, this is one of the worst problems in our country. You talk about gun violence, you'll hear numbers like 30,000 a year. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's something like, I don't know, half or 2/3 of those are suicides. And basically the vast majority of what's left is urban gang violence. Forget about the gun issue. It's a terrible problem that needs to be addressed, and I think it's pretty despicable. How we've failed to address that issue for literally decades. So anyway, we'll see. I'm not optimistic that anything good will come out of that, but I hope it does. And finally, he announced that he is filling the vacancy at the ATF, which apparently as director, which apparently has been there since 2015. They've just had temporary directors in there. And he is appointing this guy, David Chipman, as the director. David Chipman was involved in Ruby Ridge, Waco, and the Fast and the Furious debacle. Look into those if you're a little rusty on them. They're all pretty atrocious. Okay, then he goes on to urge the Senate to pass 3 House-passed bills, so 3 bills that have already been passed in the House. He's urging the Senate to pass them that will, quote-unquote, close loopholes and expand background checks. We'll get to that again, another episode. And finally, he calls on the Congress to pass an assault weapons ban and a ban on high-capacity magazines. Both absolutely terrible ideas. We'll talk about that a little bit here. Definitely more in the future. Probably gonna write a book on the reason that an assault weapons ban is a terrible idea. More on that later too. Still kind of thinking about it, but I'm leaning towards that. Finally, he calls for immunity to be removed from gun manufacturers. And again, that's something we'll talk about later. Okay, so pistol braces is where we're going to focus. And let me just say, in case you didn't go back and listen to episode 0, I don't want this to be a podcast about guns all the time. I love guns. It's one of my primary interests as far as, sort of social and political issues goes. But that's not what I want this podcast to be about. Unfortunately, it to me, it seems like one of the most important issues right now, top 2 or 3 for sure. It's something I care a lot about, something I know a lot about. So you're probably going to get more gun content than I had planned. Okay, pistol braces. So basically, the long and the short of it, pistol braces are important for legal defensive use, and they're completely irrelevant for criminal use. Okay? So they're important for real people, and they really don't serve a purpose for a criminal, especially in like the mass shooting scenario, which is, how this thing is couched, right? This is going to help prevent mass shootings. Maybe what's worse than that is politicians and the ATF know this. They're not I do think they're largely inept. I do think they're ignorant on a lot of sort of the finer details, even around something like firearms, which you think they would understand. But when it comes to something like this issue, they know that this isn't going to do anything to prevent crime. And even if you disagree with me on this, I want you to understand. I want you to understand where the gun community is coming from. So it's perfectly clear to us, and even if we're wrong, this is how we see it. It's perfectly clear to us that what they're doing is they're chipping away at our important rights, our cherished rights, but then they're lying to you in the anti-gun world or the anti-quote-unquote assault weapons world. They're lying to you about the facts, about the reality, and they're manipulating you emotionally in order for you to support them taking our rights away under the false banner of it's going to make people safer, make you safer, this kind of thing. Again, listen to what I have to say, and if you think I'm missing something, send me an email, johncguthrieShow.com. Okay, if you are in that anti-gun community, let me also just say I respect it. I fundamentally disagree, but I respect it because I can empathize. A large number of my friends and people that I've been close to over the years would not agree with a lot of my personal views on guns. I bet more than half of my friends would say, "Hey, yeah, we don't need assault rifles. Those things should be banned," something like that. I went to grad school outside of DC, freaking masters in fine arts. I've spent plenty of time around well-intentioned people who feel differently about guns than I do. But what I really want to make clear is if you're one of those people, I argue that you have an obligation to understand the issue. You need to understand where we're coming from in the gun community so you understand why we're so passionate about it. I don't think that's too much to ask. And I don't mean this in a condescending way at all, but frankly, a lot of people who are quote unquote anti-gun are people who just don't have a lot of experience with guns. And because of that, they're ignorant on the issue. And it's not a pejorative, right? If you don't have exposure to something, you're going to be ignorant on it. I don't blame you for that, but I think it's important for you to understand the issue. Okay. So, pistol braces. No benefit to society at all to ban these things, to regulate them further, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it would represent a major harm to the law-abiding gun owner. And again, the politicians, the bureaucrats, they know this. They're chipping away at our rights and convincing you that it's common sense or necessary. If you need evidence of that, just the simple fact that Biden has stated, he did it during the campaign, people didn't really notice, it was on his website, but again, in that document, he has stated his idea, his ideal that assault weapons be banned, right? And same with high capacity magazines. Beto O'Rourke and some of the other Democratic candidates came out and even said, no, we're literally going to come after your AR-15. So not just they're going to be banned, but we want to take them from you. We in the gun world have known this for, again, decades. And anytime we would say it, people would be like, oh, shut up, you're being crazy. Nobody's coming to take your guns. Well, it's out in the open now, okay? So anytime we see a law being passed or proposed that purports to do something that it obviously will not do, make you safer, cut back on mass shootings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The way we interpret that, which makes perfect sense in my opinion, is that is intended to chip away on rights that we hold dear. Okay, so that's that. Here is the language from the pistol brace bullet point from Biden's from that fact sheet that corresponded to the speech. Quote, the Justice Department within 60 days will issue a proposed rule to make clear when a device marketed as a stabilizing brace effectively turns a pistol into a short-barreled rifle, subject to the requirements of the National Firearms Act. The alleged shooter in the Boulder tragedy last month appears to have used a pistol with an arm brace, which can make a firearm more stable and accurate while still being concealable. So in other words, he is going to put out some executive guidance to the ATF to reclassify these stabilizing braces so that they fall under the purview of the National Firearms Act. And he's doing that because as the laws and regulations stand now, he's arguing that these stabilizing braces make what is now a pistol more stable and accurate and closer to a rifle. And I'm going to break this stuff down in just a second. If you're anti-gun or anti-quote-unquote assault rifles, which I'm going to start calling defense rifles, we'll talk more about that some other time. If you're anti-gun, anti-assault rifle, please do me a favor. Try to not let your mind say, I don't care about these details. I don't care about pistol braces. Nobody should own assault rifles. That's all I need to know, okay? I get it. Again, I'm probably going to write a whole book about that. But I'm talking about this specific proposed regulation, okay? This specific thing around the pistol braces, stabilizing braces. So let's focus that. Okay, number 2, explanation of details and why the National Firearms Act is totally ridiculous when it comes to this. So first, we need to understand the difference between, and we'll use the AR platform because that's mostly what this affects. It does affect other platforms also, but we'll focus on ARs. So we need to understand the difference between an AR rifle, an AR pistol, how these come into being, and what the NFA, the National Firearms Act, has to do with anything. Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a hot take for the gun world. I don't care. It's time to be honest. The gun industry will constantly say some bullshit to make an issue sound more palatable. So they'll talk about AR pistols. They'll talk about why stabilizing braces are useful, yada, yada, yada. Here's the reality. AR pistols are used as rifles. Okay, so when Joe Biden says they're turning them into short-barreled rifles, yeah, he's not wrong. Legally, he's wrong as far as the letter of the law, but practically speaking, he's not wrong. The fact that any of this nonsense exists just shows how inept they are at writing the guidelines, and I'll sort of explain that in a bit. So, okay, what's the difference between an AR pistol and an AR rifle? According to the letter of the law, an AR rifle has to be at least 26 inches in overall length and have a barrel of at least 16 inches. Okay, so if it has a shorter barrel, it has to be classified as a pistol. If it has, or a quote-unquote short-barreled rifle, we'll get to that in a second. If it has a shorter overall length of 26 inches, it has to be a pistol or a short-barreled rifle. So you can buy AR pistols just like you buy any other pistol. So all this stuff is going to vary by state, but I can go buy an AR-15 with a, whatever, 8-inch barrel, and it's a legal pistol, okay? If you do that without one of these stabilizing braces, instead of it having a stock, a shoulder stock, so the sort of triangular piece that fits into your shoulder, it doesn't have that. It just has the tube that comes out the back of the gun, basically, that's part of the recoil and firing mechanism. So if you were to shoulder it, you would just be jamming this tube in your shoulder, and that's a pistol. Or you can just hold it out like you would a rifle, but instead of having it in your shoulder, you just hold it in front of you. So that's how an AR pistol comes. This regulation would do nothing about AR pistols. They're still around. It's literally just about this brace that you put on the end of the rifle, the back of the rifle, that tube that I was talking about, or sorry, pistol. So this brace, they were, honestly, my take is they were manufactured as a way to get around these regulations, because these guys can't figure out how to write regulations that make any sense. So it's easy to circumvent them. The argument is these things strap onto your forearm. So let's say you're right-handed, you're holding the gun out in front of you. This brace straps onto your forearm to stabilize the pistol, okay? The idea with any of these AR-type pistols, if they're designed to be fired with two hands, it has to become a rifle. So that's why you can't just put a shoulder stock, a typical AR-15 stock, on an AR pistol, because now it's quote-unquote meant to be fired like a rifle with two hands, okay? So we get around that by, they design this thing, you strap it to your arm, and now you can shoot it one-handed with more quote-unquote stability. And they used injured veterans as a sort of a case study for why this would make sense, which I'm not saying it's not real. I'm saying it's not the real point. So, imagine a guy in a wheelchair with one arm and he still wants to shoot his guns. So this arm brace could help him do that, him or her, whatever. So rifle, pistol. Okay, the NFA, National Firearms Act. What does this have to do with anything? So currently, if you want to buy an AR-15 with a barrel that is less than 16 inches, you either have to take the rifle stock off and put on one of these pistol stabilizing braces, or you can keep the rifle stock on, but you have to now classify your gun as a quote-unquote short-barreled rifle, okay? That means you have to go through, it's a different background check. It's a federal issue. You go through the federal background check. You have to pay a $200 tax, and you have to engrave the weapon, and, they fingerprint you, and you tell them, where the gun will be kept, these kinds of things, right? So to get around that, let's say again, 8-inch barrel on an AR-15, to get around that, what you do is you take off the rifle stock and you put on this pistol brace, okay? When the pistol brace is not wrapped around your arm, it looks like a rifle stock. It functions as a rifle stock. So that's what I'm saying. It is. It's a loophole. It's a short-barreled rifle, okay? That's why we use them. That's how we use them. It is what it is. So to be totally fair, when he says it turns it into a short-barreled rifle, yes, okay, it does. What I'm going to spend some time explaining is this whole short-barrel rifle thing is more dangerous, or needs to be, needs to have more regulations around it. It's complete bullshit, okay? And that's what we're going to focus on here. So, basically, as long as these laws, the NFA regulations, pertain to short-barreled rifles, pistol braces are important for law-abiding gun owners, right? So the NFA should not apply to these guns logically. That's what we're going to talk about. But as long as they do, pistol braces, this particular issue, this directive is important. Okay. So here in a second, I'm going to explain to you why a pistol brace is tactically useful, tactically important, right? So defensive use for law-abiding people, they serve a very real function, okay? Whereas for the criminal side of things, especially from a mass shooting standpoint, they're completely irrelevant. They're not important. They're not useful, and you can illegally get around this issue very easily. All right, so again, the main point here is instead of having a 16-inch barrel, 26-inch overall length on a gun, you're shortening that down, okay? So like my AR-15 rifle has an 18-inch barrel and a length of, I think, oh man, I can't remember off the top of my head. I just measured a second ago. I think like 34 inches. I think 34, okay? So well beyond that rifle length, okay? My AR pistol has a 7.5-inch barrel and an overall length of like 23 inches, okay? So it's under those minimum lengths. So what this is really all about is why does anybody legally, good person, law-abiding person, why do they need that shorter platform instead of the full-size platform, okay? This is not a hobby issue, okay? Like if you followed the bump stock bullshit a few years ago, I don't give a fuck about bump stocks. I don't care that they made them illegal. The only issue I have is that, you know, when they were made illegal, the gun community should have gotten something useful out of it. So we should have protected rights that matter and fucking take the bump stocks. Who gives a fuck? It's a toy. If you fucking disagree, tell me why I'm wrong. Send me an email. But so it's painted as this device does nothing, pistol brace, this stabilizing brace does nothing but, you know, makes it easier for mass shootings. Not at all true. Okay, so before I get into why a short AR is important, let me briefly touch on why an AR-15 is an important defensive weapon, okay? A lot of people just don't get this. An AR-15, generally speaking, there are caveats for days. Depends on where you live, apartment, who's around, how close are houses, how many people are in your house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Generally speaking, an AR-15 is, I'll say it's one of the best home defense guns, okay? I don't want to say V because, again, there's a lot that goes into it. There's something like 20 million ARs in the country, and I guarantee the vast majority of those are for defensive purposes. So why an AR? People always, you know, if you know a little bit about them, you know, people will say, oh man, if you shot that in your house, it's going to fly through all the walls and kill somebody across the street, as opposed to a pistol or a shotgun. You know, over-penetration is what that's known as. The fact of the matter, that's not really true, okay? It doesn't, you can look into it. I don't want to spend a bunch of time on it, but plenty of research has been done. That's just not that true. The deal is any rifle caliber, so whether it's you know, 5.56 or a 300 blackout, those are sort of the two popular AR-15 calibers, or, you know, like an AK round, or a shotgun, a 12 gauge, 20 gauge. Rifles and shotguns are far more effective at stopping the threat, aka incapacitating or killing a person who's presenting a threat, than a pistol. Okay, people say, "No, man, you just need a pistol." The reality of it is, pistols are great for carrying on a day-to-day basis, concealing, right? Having it on you all the time. That's why pistols are great. But if you actually have to shoot somebody in a life or death situation, you don't want to have a pistol. You just don't. You can go watch, police shooting videos or like real defense videos, on YouTube. Read stories about these things. You can see and read and hear about all sorts of scenarios where people take numerous pistol rounds before they stop. Okay. In a defensive scenario, this is bad, right? It's all about time. If somebody, let's just use home defense. If somebody armed is coming in your house and they're either shooting at you or they may shoot at you, they're about to shoot at you, something like this, it's all about time. If it takes 30 seconds for that encounter to end versus 5 seconds, you want the 5 seconds, okay? So if you have to shoot somebody, you want to shoot somebody with a rifle or pistol caliber, okay? ARs, super effective. That's why they've been, the 5.56, that's why the caliber has been used by the military for like 50 years now, okay? It does the job. It does it well. So, quote unquote, stopping power. Magazine capacity, right? So most ARs have 30 rounds. So, the idea is with one shot to the center mass of a human target, the fight's over. But if for some reason, if you're actually in a freaking gunfight, it's nice to have 30 rounds as opposed to 6 in a revolver or maybe 10 or 15 in your pistol. So magazine capacity is good. In the event that there were multiple armed people that you're defending yourself against in your house, out in the world, whatever, again, you want maximum stopping power. You want a good number of rounds on deck. And again, over penetration is not the boogeyman that people paint it out to be. Long story short, most people who know what they're talking about will tell you that an AR-15 platform is a fantastic home defense weapon. As far as the short ones go, and this is why special forces use short-barreled rifles. Okay, so again, this is not a toy. This isn't a hobby thing. This isn't just a cool factor, something that's not really important, right? That's how you'll hear it painted. Short-barreled rifles are practical for close quarters combat, which is why all of the special forces communities are going to use a short-barreled rifle in a close quarters scenario. The reason that's the case, they're lighter weight, okay? They're shorter. So you got to think about, what did I say? My big gun's 34 inches. So think about moving through doorways, moving around doorways, raising and lowering that gun as you're trying to get a sight picture. It makes it way more difficult the longer the weapon is, okay? So 34 inches for my long gun, 23 inches for my short gun. It makes it much easier to maneuver in close quarters because it's lighter weight. Again, it's easier to maneuver. Lighter weight just because it's smaller, right? On top of that, if you are moving around in an indoor environment with a rifle or a shotgun, anything long, the longer that weapon is, the greater risk is that somebody could grab it, okay? So the longer the weapon is, the more of a lever it becomes, right? Basic physics, basic science. If you grab the end of my 34-inch gun, you can put way more pressure on that and get it away from me than the shorter gun. But not only factoring in once somebody has their hands on the end of the gun, just, I come around the corner, you're 3 feet away from me. It's the difference between, you being able to reach out and grab it versus having to take a step and giving me the opportunity to back away. So, that's a real concern. It's a real consideration. Another reason why shorter is better. The same is going to go for cars. Okay. If you're an anti-gun person, you're not going to like this, but the fact of the matter is, a lot of people in this country keep an AR-15 platform in their vehicle. Again, same reason. If you need to shoot someone, you want to use a rifle or a shotgun as opposed to your handgun. So a lot of people keep them in the car. Imagine reaching over and grabbing something that weighs, 7 or 8 pounds instead of 5 or 6 pounds and is 3 feet long instead of 2 feet long. Obviously, it's way easier to wield and maneuver the short weapon. Imagine you're sitting in the driver's seat and have to actually shoot without getting out of the car. It's going to be very difficult to do with the full size. It's going to be much easier to do with the small size. So that's another reason why people use them. All in all, easier to maneuver, easier to wield. That goes for everybody, right? It's easier for everybody. But this becomes important for smaller, lighter, weaker people. So whether we're talking about women, or you're talking about older folks, or somebody that has some kind of disability, it really does make sense for the quote-unquote pistol or short barrel rifle to be used instead of the full-size rifle. You'll, and I'm not saying this flippantly, you'll see women make the argument, pro-gun women, that gun regulations are anti-women. They, when it comes to like concealed carry, they're like, hey, if you care about women's safety, let us carry guns. And the same goes for this. So if an AR platform is preferable to a pistol in home defense, and an AR pistol or a short-barreled rifle is easier for a woman to use than a full length, then making it more difficult for people, including women, to get the short-barreled rifle or to effectively use the AR pistol, it is going to disproportionately affect women as opposed to like a larger full-size strongman. So now let me explain why. Well, okay, let me go back to that. So that's what short-barreled rifles are all about. AR pistols are all about. The pistol brace, the stabilizing brace, this is what this is targeting again. The whole reason that we use those is because it gives you something to shoulder, right? So it gives you the ability to use it as a rifle so you can effectively aim it, okay? That's the whole point, as opposed to just the tube or holding it out in front of you, sort of movie gangster style. So if we can't put a rifle stock on the short-barreled rifle without jumping through the hoops, then we need the pistol brace. It's important. It's useful, okay? Because the pistol brace, stabilizing brace, allows us to shoulder it like a rifle. Stupid fucking loophole, but that's the reality. Let me explain to you why this doesn't matter at all for mass shooters. Practically doesn't matter. Legally doesn't matter. They can circumvent it if they want to, and the law won't do anything. This will not have any effect on mass shootings whatsoever. None. Zero. Okay? So they're saying that the guy in Colorado used one of these. Very well may be true. If that's the case, it's the first time I've ever heard of a mass shooter using one of these braces. So let's think about that. I've read that there are estimated to be 4 million stabilizing braces in the country. So one guy used one in a crime. It wasn't necessary for him to use it. Wasn't beneficial for him to use it. It did not make his crime any easier. But because that one guy happened to use one, we need to now impact the 4 million current ones in existence, which probably represents 3 million plus gun owners. Not to mention anybody who wants one in the future. Okay, so why is this not necessary for a mass shooting? Why is it easy to circumvent for a mass shooter? So if you remember when I was explaining to you what an AR pistol is, right, shorter, and if it doesn't have that stabilizing brace, there's just a tube that comes out on it. That's totally fine if all you're doing is shooting a crowd of unarmed, innocent people. You don't need to accurately fire that weapon. You're just freaking dumping bullets into innocent people, okay? You can do that by shoving that tube in your shoulder. You're just not going to be quite as accurate. You don't need to be super accurate when you're shooting people at close range with a rifle. Okay, that's just the reality of it. So he could hold it out in front of him. He could shoulder it. It's going to work just fine. Okay, so that's if you wanted to use a quote-unquote pistol. The way gun regulations work in the United States, there are two main components on an AR-15. The lower receiver, which typically has the stock on it. The grip is there, trigger's there. And then the upper receiver, which is where the barrel and some of the other mechanisms are. I'm trying to keep the language kind of simple here. So these two components, you can buy them separately. The lower receiver is the part that has a serial number. That's the actual gun. That's what you have to have a background check to buy. Okay, so you can go buy a rifle lower receiver, and then you can buy or order online a quote-unquote pistol barrel, a shorter barrel, without going through the NFA process. It's a separate piece. It's not really regulated. And in like literally 10 seconds, you can pop it in. You just pull out two pins, literally 10 seconds, and it snaps together. Okay. So if you wanted to commit a crime and you wanted a shorter barrel, but you didn't want to have to go through the NFA process, you buy a standard rifle lower receiver and you buy a short upper receiver and you're done. Okay. The end. The end. This law won't do anything. That would be illegal for that guy. He's going to go shoot up a crowd of people. Doesn't care if he's breaking a gun law. Okay? It's fucking irrelevant. Okay. Let's see here. Sorry, looking at my notes. The idea that a short-barreled rifle is more concealable is a joke. Is it more concealable? Yes, technically it is, right? Let's say it's 9 inches shorter. It's more concealable. Is it concealable? No. No. What the hell? How are you going to conceal a 2-foot rifle? I mean, you could like wrap it around in a trench coat, but you could do the same with a full-size rifle. And if you didn't want to do that, you could put it in a full-size rifle. You could put it in a suitcase, a guitar case, a hanging garment bag, a baseball bag, a golf bag. You could put it in a shopping cart and throw a blanket over it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Nobody's like effectively concealing one of these things, whether it's short or long. It's bullshit. Doesn't have anything to do with anything. Let's see. So, somebody might say, again, this is not the issue that we're talking about, but somebody might say, just ban short barrels. Just get rid of the short barrels. Because the concealable thing, which I just explained, is nonsense. But again, 16 inches, standard length for a rifle barrel when it comes to ARs, is totally fine for crime, right? Mass shooting, it's totally fine. It's not great for home and car defense for that length reason, right? So again, banning the barrels would only affect the legal people who have a need for them. Would not affect the criminal, especially when it comes to something like a mass shooting. Doesn't make any sense. Finally, if one of those guys wanted to shorten the barrel, they could just saw it off. Illegal for me to do, felon. That it would make me a felon. Again, if you're going to go commit a mass murder, you don't mind being a felon right before then. Okay? Doesn't make any sense. I could see somebody saying, all right, well, if they wanted to conceal it, if it's legal for them to own one of these small ones, then that would give them the ability to train and become more proficient with it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, in a mass shooting, you don't need that kind of training. It's really not necessary. And then again, if let's say that person did want to get some training and they're worried about, they illegally modified something, so they have a rifle stock, rifle lower, and a pistol barrel, short upper, and they want to go practice, but they don't want to get caught because that's illegal, and they didn't want to go through the NFA process for some reason. None of this makes any sense. All they would need to do is shoot a standard full-sized AR, get comfortable with it, pop on the barrel. You don't need to sight it in. Flip up sights are going to be totally fine. You don't even need sights for shooting people, unarmed, close quarters. You know, you can any scenario is going to be effective for a mass shooter, right? There's no skill involved. It's just freaking slaughter. It's just totally irrelevant. So there are just numerous ways for the person, we'll just say the mass shooter, to get around any of these regulations. They could just ignore them and not mind being a felon as they drove to commit their fucking homicide. They could just not have a brace at all, just buy an AR pistol, okay? And it'll be totally effective. They could modify them themselves, cut the barrel off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they're like literally like a dozen ways for them to get around the regulation that we law-abiding people can't do without instantly becoming a felon. Okay. So now finally, what are the enforcement options? What's this actually going to look like? And why does it matter? Just follow the regulations, even though it's perfectly clear that they're completely useless to the thing that they're claiming they'll do. Just do what they say. Just follow the new laws. Don't complain about it. Your gun rights are good enough. Okay. So first off, politicians and bureaucrats, they're inept, they're slow moving. Individuals and private companies are going to continue to innovate around any cumbersome regulations. It's just all there is to it. That's how pistol braces came to be in the first place. You pass a stupid law, it's like, okay, now how can we get around it? That's just reality. That's what's going to happen. Now let's talk about what the NFA requires. So if this legislation goes through, forget about what it's going to do to existing ones. Let's say you want to go buy a pistol brace or a short-barreled rifle to be compliant with the new regulations. So it's an additional $200. Okay, it's a $200 tax just to get the paperwork. That's all it's doing. Okay, so my big AR I got on sale a couple of years ago for $450. It was a screaming deal, but still. So a $200 tax on that is a 44% tax. Or you could look at it this way. My pistol brace that I have on my little gun was $120. So a $200 tax on that $120 item is a 167% tax. Do that math on a $30,000 car. So your $30,000 car now costs $45,000. Your $30,000 car now costs $175,000, something like that. It's insanity. It's insanity. It's just it's a confiscatory level of tax. It's madness. Now, a lot of people, it's like, man, whatever, it's $200, no big deal. I don't care about the percentage. It's $200. I'm not worried about it. But as with all regulations and taxes, who's it going to hurt? It's going to hurt poor people. Okay, so imagine. Hang on, got a sneeze going. Sorry, might delete that. Probably not. Imagine you're you don't have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money, but imagine having whatever, even less money than I have. You're saving up money because you want an AR-15 because you want it for home defense. You want it to protect your family. So now instead of it costing, these days you'd be lucky to get one for $700, $600, $700, $800, and instead of it costing that, you got to add $200 onto that. Okay, that's a big deal. It's a big deal. And like it or not, who's that going to affect disproportionately? What groups make up poor people at a disproportionate level? People of color. Okay, so the people who are anti-gun, you're going to hear them all virtue signaling about how much they care about people of color, black people. These types of regulations impact them the most. Okay, and again, that's not just me saying it. Go talk to some pro-gun black people. They will tell you that. Okay, this is just like cash bail or court costs. Same idea to my friends on the left out there. you know that those disproportionately affect poor people and by extension disproportionately affect minorities. It's the same with this, okay? So you need to be aware of that. So that's the cost. That's the cost issue. So for new braces, new short-barreled rifles, that's what you're looking at, $200. And the background check process, for NFA stuff, it's always backed up. It takes like 6 months, okay? Whether you like it or not. Some people need a gun quickly for protection. That's reality. And these brutally long waiting periods are going to result in good people not having a tool that they need when they need it. It's a fact. So people who don't comply, they're going to be instant felons. So let's say it's a retroactive thing, which it very well may be. So Joe comes out and he says, bang, here's the law. If you own one of these, you've got to now make it NFA compliant. That means you have to take it in. You have to get it engraved. You have to pay the $200 tax. You have to go through additional background checks, yada, 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 yada. And now if you don't, you're an instant felon. So you bought something legally, did everything legally, paid for it legally, taxes, all that shit squared away, and now they decide that if you don't do something extra, you're a felon. It's insanity, and again, it's completely useless, guys. It's not going to do anything for crime, not going to do anything for mass shootings. All it's going to do is hurt people who need them, want them for very legitimate purposes. This is something that could potentially lead to unnecessary conflict. So first off, social division, guaranteed. Guaranteed. Political division, guaranteed going to make it worse. Fact. Okay? But it could actually lead to more violence. We just saw the worst political violence in decades last year. Okay? This is adding more tinder to that fire. Again, I'm going to write a book about it, but when you're talking about something like banning assault rifles, quote unquote assault rifles, confiscating them, you're begging for armed conflict at that point. But this is it's increasing the possibility. And for what? For what? Okay. Another thing, if these items concern you, in spite of the fact that they serve no practical purpose at deterring crime, they just make you uncomfortable. The fact of the matter is, every time any of this legislation or regulations are proposed or announced, sales go through the roof. It's perfectly rational. Every time I hear about something's probably going to be banned or they're thinking about banning them, sweet, I go buy a couple more because I don't know if I'm going to be able to, in a couple months. So you are, Joe Biden, you are selling AR-15s. You're selling AK-47s. You are selling, quote unquote, high-capacity magazines. You are selling pistol braces. You're literally making them fly out the door. So if you're concerned about these products, you should probably not encourage their proliferation, which is what you're doing. More division, guys. It's sowing more division for no benefit. No benefit. Okay? None. All right, so that's the bulk of it. So let me recap real quick. Pistol stabilizing braces are, in and of themselves, a stupid, bullshit, loophole, bureaucratic cluster. Okay? They really shouldn't even be an issue. But because of the laws, because of the way the law is right now, they are important in our sort of current moment. They're virtually never used in mass shootings. Even when they are, they're not at all necessary. They're not beneficial for that evil act. They could effortlessly be circumvented, and all it would do is hurt legal uses. There are very real legal uses for home defense, self-defense, vehicle defense, honest, law-abiding American citizens protecting themselves, their property, and their family, okay? As we have a human, moral, and legal right to do, okay? These restrictions will be expensive and burdensome to everybody, and they will especially hurt the most vulnerable people in our population. poor people, women, people of color. And again, this is only going to increase political division. If you're on the left, on the anti-gun side of things, listen to me. They're manipulating your ignorance and your emotions to further chip away at rights that are held sacred by tens of millions of your fellow citizens. And there is absolutely no benefit to society whatsoever. Okay? That's what it all comes down to. Again, if you disagree with anything, shoot me an email, johncguthrieShow@gmail.com. johncguthrie.com to sign up for emails. You can kick me some bucks and donate over there. Patreon.com/JohnCGuthrie if you want to do some donations over there. Anything would be greatly appreciated. Obviously, I'm just getting this stuff off the ground, but I want to be able to focus on this full time. I don't want to just do gun issues. I really want to explore all sorts of important issues with the goal of decreasing division. Okay. My tagline is tackling the absurd and the solvable. We can solve the major problems that are out there, and we can do it without increasing division. That's the stuff I want to focus on. Eventually want to do a bunch of interviews and that kind of thing. All right, shoot me an email, johncguthrieShow@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter, jcarlguth. Thanks. Peace.